So if you are all ready, may we start, Ambassador Sahib?
Sir, please.
Our Director for Center for Strategic Perspective, you will initiate the discussion. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening and assalamu alaikum to you all. On behalf of Center for Strategic Perspective at the Institute of Strategic Studies, Islamabad, I welcome you all at today's web talk titled Pakistan and the United States, Next Step in Relationship. The withdrawal of the US troops from Afghanistan provides an important opportunity for Pakistan to reassess its relations with the US in the light of shared interest and priorities. The most important and immediate priority that Pakistan-US share is the need to seek a political settlement with the Taliban and to prevent the humanitarian crisis and Afghan civil war, as Pakistan and the US have shared interest in peace, prosperity, and stability in Afghanistan. The second important step is the need to identify policies and mechanisms which ensure stability in the region, as nowhere else do three nuclear-armed states with powerful militaries adjoin and share borders. The third step lies in exploring concrete areas for bilateral engagements in areas such as trade, agriculture, and technology transfer. The fourth area of interest is to expand and deepen bilateral cooperation on issues such as COVID relief, climate change, education, and socio-cultural exchanges. Another step is to increase diplomatic engagements between the two capitals to build a positive image of Pakistan and encourage partners in the US to restore engagements through strategic dialogue to overcome the trust deficit that exists between the two states. Keeping in mind the drastically changing security environment in the region and the remodeling of the relations between Pakistan and US, it's imperative to redirect a discussion that builds upon the positives in Pakistan-US relations. Today's web talk provides a useful opportunity to reflect upon Pakistan-US relations and the future it holds. So for the speaker for today's web talk is Ambassador Asad Majid, Pakistan's ambassador to the United States. Ambassador Majid is a career Pakistan Foreign Service officer and his doctorate in international economics and business law from Kyushu University, Japan. He has also served as additional foreign secretary and directorate general in Ministry of Foreign Affairs from June 2016 to August 2016. Along with him, we have two other discussants, Dr. Rifat Hussain and Dr. Rabia Akhtar. With a very brief profile of the two discussants, Dr. Rifat Hussain is professor and head of Department of Government and Public Policy in School of Social Sciences and Humanities at National University Science and Technology, Islamabad. Dr. Rifat Hussain is also author of numerous books and publications. Dr. Rabia Akhtar is Director, Center for Security, Strategy and Policy Research, University of Lahore. Dr. Akhtar holds a PhD in Security Studies from Kansas State University and is a member of Prime Minister's Advisory Council on Foreign Affairs. So before we go to our esteemed speaker, I request Ambassador Azaz Ahmed Chaudhry, Director General at Institute of Strategic Studies, for his welcome remarks. With a very brief profile of Director General, Ambassador Chaudhry had an illustrious career of 37 years in the Foreign Service and has served as Foreign Secretary of Pakistan with active participation in high-level foreign policy discussions at multiple international diplomatic forums. Ambassador Chaudhry for his welcome remarks and for further proceedings, sir.
Thank you. A very warm welcome to everyone, especially Dr. Asad Majid Khan, our ambassador to the United States, and the two discussants, Professor Rifat Hussain and Dr. Rabia Akhtar. I will be moderating the discussion after the ambassador has spoken and discussants have given their comments. This is part of our ambassadors platform. Earlier, we used to have foreign ambassadors based in Islamabad to give public talk, which we still do. But now we are also engaging our own ambassadors in key foreign capitals so that we increase the awareness about the priorities and narratives that our ambassadors are pursuing in their respective jurisdictions. So it is in that context that we have requested Ambassador Asad Majid Khan, who I know is very busy, especially at this time of the year, but he's very kind to make time for us. May I invite you, Ambassador Asad Majid Khan, to straight away take the floor and share your thoughts. For the record, let me state that this is on the record, and its recording will be placed on our website and the Institute's Facebook as well as YouTube channel. And this is for the general knowledge of the public, and therefore we want an open discussion. Sir, you have the floor, Ambassador Saab. You have about 20 minutes to speak, and then we'll have the discussions comment on. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, sir. First of all, Ambassador Izaz Ahmed Chaudhry Saab, for inviting me to speak. I see Ambassador Khalid Mahmood, Dr. Rifat Hussain, my teacher, and Dr. Rabia also. A good evening to those joining in Pakistan, and a very good morning to those who may actually be tuning in from here in the United States. I'd like to, first of all, because in some ways I feel a little nostalgic also, sir, because as a Foreign Service officer, our initiation into the world of international affairs, ISIS, ISSI, had a role to play, having been trained next door in the Foreign Services Academy. And I must thank you and the Institute for having made important contributions over the decades, I would say, in initiating many like me into the arena of diplomacy. So thank you very much for your contributions. Now, Pakistan-US relationship, of course, is a topic of great interest. And particularly these days, it has only become hotter, I would say, given the developments in our neighborhood. So before I get into where we are in the relationship today, I'd really like to go back and look at this relationship very briefly in terms of how our relationship with the United States has evolved. And when I look back from 1947 onwards, I really see one Cold War and two hot wars, essentially defining the thrust and direction of this relationship. And when I say the Cold War, so it is essentially the period from 1947 to 1979, when the Soviet Union occupied Afghanistan. And that's when the Cold War turned hot for us, although it was hot to the extent that it was happening in our neighborhood, but it was not really a day-to-day reality for the people of Pakistan. And then the third and the last phase is from 2001 to 2021 to date. And these 20 years, I think this war only became hotter, and it actually came to our doorstep. So therefore, to no one's surprise, America and the United States footprint in Pakistan and its impact on us, on our society, has been profound and far-reaching. And I think that the Cold War and the two hot wars also, over the years, essentially made this relationship a security-centered relationship. While, of course, the assistance part of it also played an important role and kind of lingered in the periphery, but that never was the central focus and thrust. Whereas the investment part of it and the business part of it, frankly, remained a sideshow. I mean, I was stuck to see that like until 1992, our exports to United States were less than $1 billion. And even after that, also starting with from 2005, that's when our exports actually crossed a little over $3 billion. The total amount actually remains static for next 15 years, only to be increased just last year when we crossed the $5 billion mark. So I think that really gives us a sense of how this has been essentially a security-centered relationship. I think one other part of this relationship that has actually played an important part, and that has been, frankly, an important US contribution to Pakistan is in the realm of education, in terms of training, in terms of educating and the capacity building of our civil service, of our military, and of our even academic elite also, and also in terms of building institutions in Pakistan that have over the years made important contributions. Now, with the Afghanistan withdrawal taking place, clearly, I think for the first time over the past 20 years, there is an opportunity, because over these 20 years, our relationship was essentially viewed through the prism of Afghanistan. And for a number of reasons, because of heightened expectations, and also because of the mission creep and the rent-seeking industry that developed in Afghanistan and here in the United States also, and the desire to kind of explain the failures. So there was consistently finger pointing in both directions. So clearly, Afghanistan, I would say, became a burden for the relationship. And in that context, and also the confidence and the view here that United States can resolve it militarily was something that I think in many ways influenced the decisions, the determinations, and the judgments that the policy community and successive administrations made here in the United States. And then comes President Trump. And I think Trump phenomena was very unique. I think the platform on which he contested the election, his very clear-eyed position on ending the forever wars, on reducing the American military footprint overseas, brought a clarity, frankly, that was not there earlier. And also, I think, realism on the part of the DoD and the Pentagon, that there really was no military solution to the conflict in Afghanistan. And that's, I think, is where, frankly, our position and the US position essentially became aligned. So not just that, I think once President Trump made the decision, in fact, if you go back and look at the sequence of events, you would see that, frankly, President Trump had come quite hard on Pakistan, at least in the first year, and you are personally witness to that. Simply because there was a lot of residual skepticism in the United States over how Pakistan had conducted itself, and the perceptions which were, I would say, mostly exaggerated and not well-founded. And that's the myth, I think, that exploded when United States witnessed the collapse of the Afghan forces. But it was actually President Trump who then decided that he wants to get out. And I think in his own reckoning, Pakistan had a very important role to play. And that resulted in the president putting a lot of his personal capital in reaching out to Pakistan. And I've been a student, and as you have been a student of this relationship for many years, I think he picked up the pen, wrote a letter, he made several calls. We had 3 successive summits in a very short span of 6 months, simply because I think President Trump made a determination that Pakistan had an important role to play, and therefore he should work very closely with Pakistan, and his own out-of-box thinking in approaching the problem. He even went or was at least ready to even invite Taliban to the Camp David. So that really reflected the extent to which he was ready to expend his own political capital in seeking to resolve a political issue, which he thought was important. So, and then came the transition, a new administration, which inherited I would say, a lot of unprecedented issues and problems not normally seen here in the United States, a contested election, a ongoing impeachment, and then a decision to withdraw where there was a deadline on the calendar, but frankly, there was no plan on the ground. And that, I think, only complicated. But in between these past 5 years, I can tell you that we basically, at least for the past 3 years, the facilitation that Pakistan did in terms of helping with the peace process, clearly, I would say, contributed in building trust between Pakistan and United States. Now, President Biden, whom I'm sure you have seen as Vice President, as Senator, as Chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, always had a very strong position on Afghanistan. But despite reservations from the military establishment, clearly President Biden, and this is one area where his thinking was not too far apart from that of President Trump. And the collapse, frankly, of the Afghan National Forces clearly surprised everybody. And I think there are many who are in a state of shock, anger, and disbelief in seeing what they saw. And therefore, we clearly can see an internal, finger pointing, domestic tussle going on in passing the blame on to the other side. And that has also generated a sentiment of reflection and introspection on exactly what went wrong and how did it go wrong. And both in the media as well as on the Hill, there are different legislative proposals also in the works that seek to basically draw lessons. And there are, of course, questions being raised on Pakistan's role also, given the fact that we have always had a central role to play. And not just that, I think there are also very serious questions being raised on exactly why and how $2.5 trillion, even after spending that kind of amount, there are no results to be seen on the ground. Right now, I would say in the relation, and I'm explaining this because I think Afghanistan will remain the primary and principal conversation track, whether we are keen to move to the geoeconomic side of the narrative. But until Afghanistan is out of our way, and I think in that context, there are two clearly key priorities or a few priorities that we hear and see the occupying or preoccupying the US policymaker. But first, of course, is evacuation, because there is a certain emotional and a sentimentality attached to it, as to no one US citizen left behind. So evacuations is an issue, and until the US is very sure that every single one who wanted to leave is out, this will continue to kind of gain attraction and interest here. Second, of course, is terrorism, which remains a continuing concern, and the threat to homeland. women rights is also something that particularly interests the women legislators on the Hill, and also the civil society activists. So that's also an issue. Of course, human rights as a basket is something that is closely monitored, but I think in that basket, women rights and the absence of women is also something that is bothering many here. Similarly, inclusivity also, because and this is again a view which is shared by many here, and I think generally also in the region, that for sustainable peace, I think Afghanistan will have to have an inclusive government. Now, basically, with the US forces withdrawn, clearly, when there are no boots on the ground, there is no money in the pipeline. This is the principle, because there is no interest here also. So in the medium to long term, we are certainly going to see the interest in Afghanistan recede here. And for now, for what we are, our objectives vis-a-vis the US policy or strategy in Afghanistan is concerned, I think what we are trying to convey here is that the best counterterrorism investment, because that remains the primary and principal concern. The best counterterrorism investment actually in the context of Afghanistan is to invest in peace in Afghanistan. Secondly, that threats and force has not worked in the past. So there is very little likelihood that this is going to work in future either. So any attempt to reframe Taliban as the enemy perhaps will be counterproductive, because clearly so far in the way they have conducted, not just in terms of standing by their commitments in the context of the agreement that they signed with the United States of not attacking US during withdrawal, not attacking retrograde, even the after post-attack US presence, I think there was, and there are now news reports out there which clearly indicate that there was very close coordination also. So they are making the right noises, taking the right decisions. They might actually be baby steps, but things are moving in the right direction. So, and the view is that let's incentivize good behavior. Caution perhaps may not be the best option. And I think while there were conversations taking place between the United States, and I think at no point in time they had a complete break, but formally now US has engaged Taliban post-August 15, and the Doha meeting, I would say, was an important and welcome development. So we understand that this was not a one-off thing, so perhaps more engagements are likely to happen in future also. The fact that the withdrawal was bloodless, that there was operational coordination when withdrawal was taking place, the fact that US has publicly committed to giving humanitarian assistance unconditionally, even when there are issues in the context of the unfreezing of Taliban or Afghanistan assets in the United States and across Europe. We feel that this has created and will create more space. I think over the last 5 years, what has happened in the relationship is that clearly, because Trump, for his own reasons, started off rather, critically on Pakistan and suspended military assistance, reduced economic support. So that really has reduced Pakistan's dependence on the United States. There's very little economic assistance flowing in, no military assistance. In fact, I would say that Pakistan has been on the giving end in the context of providing and facilitating the peace process. I think what did happen was that we started to have very good optics, and that I would say was perhaps a contribution that President Trump made in his extensive outreach to Pakistan. Except for what has happened in August or after or in the lead up to August 15, that's when we have started to see more criticism of Pakistan in the media and on the Hill. Beyond that, I think the official tone and tenor of our conversations remains very cordial. I think there is a broad alignment on what US wants to do in Afghanistan and what we want to do in Afghanistan. And we clearly see that in Afghanistan, there is a space for all to coexist. And I think our outreach to the neighborhood and then the Troika Plus, where Russia, China, and United States are part of those conversations, clearly reflect the common concerns that all these important countries have in the context of the evolving situation in Afghanistan. Now, the new stresses, while doing Afghanistan right is essential to basically move to the next level in the relationship. But even if we have basically done Afghanistan right and we are able to actually work together to achieve peace, but there are no two new stresses again on the relationship in ways that these stresses were not there. And then first, of course, is China and the escalation between United States and China. And then on the other hand, it is basically India and the new relationship and the strategic partnership, growing partnership that US is seeking to forge with India, obviously are two other factors. Although we keep saying privately and publicly that we don't want our relationship to be seen through any other country's prism, and we do not believe in hyphenated relationships. But the fact of the matter is that and we also believe also that there is enough space in South Asia for these major powers to coexist, and that Afghanistan should be made the arena of cooperation and collaboration and not confrontation. Yet, I think there are stresses on the relationship, and there may be more in future, and that frankly will be our diplomatic challenge, and not just for Pakistan. I would say it would be a challenge for most diplomatic establishments, because there are efforts to resurrect the ghost of Cold War, and how that would impact is also something that we'll have to track closely. But this is again no challenge which is peculiar or special only to Pakistan. In terms of our own relationship with the United States or for the future, clearly, I think Pakistan in its own right, as a major, one of fifth largest country, a strategically located country, trade remains today. US is our largest export destination. US is one of the top 5 consistent investors in Pakistan over the last 70 years. Technology is one area where we are, and when I said $5 billion plus exports, so that does not actually include the technology related exports. And this is one sector where we are seeing phenomenal growth, and a lot of potential for more in future also. So this is one aspect that will continue. Then I think one other aspect which is not there is the presence of over 1 million very influential, well-placed Pakistani American diaspora here. And the linkages that we have with the United States, I think that will continue to bear a strong influence on the trajectory and direction of the relationship. Similarly, I think many see us more in the context of the Middle East, in the West Asia, again because of Afghanistan. But Pakistan's maritime potential, our location being one of the largest Indian Ocean rim littoral state, is something that is a dimension that hasn't really figured as prominently as it should. And Pakistan's desire to use our location to essentially provide a bridge to the landlocked Central Asia and to be the corridor with the Eurasian countries is something I think that has enormous potential, and that would interest equally all those major powers, both in Europe, in America, and in Asia also. Uh, on the relationship, I can say, and I hope I have not crossed my 20 minutes, that the primary track remains Afghanistan. For now, therefore, the geo-economic dimension of the relationship will have to wait until Afghanistan is settled. But clearly, the engagements, the bilateral engagements are picking up. And we are seeing a pattern because, and a structure emerging, because it started off with physical meeting. Of course, during COVID, it's all virtual. So the phone calls were the preferred mode, but it started off with the two meetings between our national security advisor and the US national security advisor, and they kind of discussed the outline of a structured engagement. And we have seen a physical meeting between Secretary Blinken and Secretary and Foreign Minister, where I think both content and chemistry was absolutely fantastic, followed by Deputy Secretary Sherman's visit. And then not just that, we are at a lower level, also having conversation tracks in climate change, in energy. USTR has spoken to advisor, Secretary Commerce has spoken to advisor. So there is clearly a desire and intent to basically engage in multiple tracks. But for now, frankly, Afghanistan is sucking oxygen out of every other track, and it's still not deterring us to basically continue those conversations. And we do hope that as things get better in Afghanistan, we are going to be focusing more and spending more time and energy on this. I'll just stop here because I know I've a lot to learn also from a very distinguished panel today. So thank you very much, sir, for having me.
Thank you, Ambassador Asad Majid Khan. This was really very useful, very clear too. A number of questions and important points have been raised that come to my mind also. But let's wait till we have the discussion and then you can respond. So let's take the first discussant, Professor Rifat Hussain. Sir, would you like to go first for your 5 to 7 minutes, please? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Izza. And I'm also grateful to Asad Majid Khan Sahab for a very lucid and for a very positive, if I may say, account of what's happening in terms of Pakistan-US ties, particularly with a focus on Afghanistan. And as he rightly said, that Afghanistan will remain the main vehicle for some time, and it will have a much larger role to play unless the situation in Afghanistan stabilizes. But let me point out, because Ambassador Khan talked about the one Cold War and then the two hot wars. But let me mention here, for the sake of history as a record, that there was another conflict which had nothing to do with Pakistan, even though Pakistan got involved in it in an indirect way, which was the Sino-Indian War of 1962. During which it grew out of the Nehru's forward policy vis-a-vis with China along the line of actual control. And during this conflict, the Nehru wrote two very important letters which were sent to the then American President John F. Kennedy, in which he had requested help, diplomatic help, as well as strategic help from United States, so that he would have the means to cope with the Chinese threat. Now, I'm recalling this incident because at that time, India was talking about the non-alignment, and there were many people who had said that how is it that a non-aligned country is seeking help from a patron of alignment, which is the United States, to deal with China's threat. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is because in the current scenario, when the Indo-US strategic relationship is so strong and is growing, as evidenced by Quad and AUKUS things, should there be a similar kind of a conflict, what would be China's response? So that's my question. I would like to learn from Ambassador Khan's views about this. Even though this may seem to be a far-fetched scenario, but in the current Indian mindset, in which they openly talk of fighting war on two fronts, what will be the American response? And of course, at that time, the Americans did give help to the Indians, but the war had been quickly won by China. That's one. The second important issue is you have talked about many positive things that are happening between Pakistan and United States. You have talked about low-level official engagements. You have talked about the meeting between the NSAs. But despite this, why has there never been a call from the US government to Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan? I'm sure you have asked this question many a time, but I would like to know that, are there any misgivings which are blocking the continuation of a communication channel between Washington and Islamabad? And the third thing is that there is, to me at least, it appears that there is a tremendous ambiguity in the mind of the congressman and the Pentagon about the kind of relationship that they want to have with Pakistan. And we have seen this contradiction coming into play during these congressional hearings, in which all kinds of issues were raised and concerns were raised relating to Pakistan's nuclear weapons capability. So I would like Ambassador Khan to also kind of enlighten on these issues. But I agree with you that the trend line in terms of low-level official engagement is the right thing. And you have described many ways in which these trends will go away, hopefully after Afghanistan is removed as a source of friction between Pakistan and the United States. So these were some of the comments that I wanted to make, and let me stop at this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saib. I have noted all the 3 points, and I'm sure Dr. Asad Majid Khan has done too. We'll come to that. So let's first listen to Dr. Rabia Akhtar's reflections on what Ambassador Asad Majid Khan has stated, and then we will go to Ambassador Asad Majid Khan again. Dr. Rabia Akhtar, sir, ma'am, you have the floor.
Ambassador Azaz Chaudhry, Ambassador Khalid Mahmood, and Ambassador Asad Majid Khan. Thank you so much, sir, for your very enlightening remarks. Since you are at the heart of everything, so it was really, enriching for my own perspective as well as for others as well. I will be extremely brief because I think Dr. Rifat and yourself, have covered a lot of ground. There is just one thing probably that I would like to say, and that is that, Pakistan-US relationship historically has been a relationship of aid and sanctions. And there is a history of grievances on both sides. And both sides have felt misunderstood by the other for either their motivations or actions. That has been our history. And it seems that we are coming full circle again, with respect to this misunderstanding, with respect to each other's motivations and actions. Having said that, the point that I would like to make today is that after all these years, two things have happened now. we are free of tags in this relationship. First, the AFPAC prism has broken. And second, the Indo-Pak dehyphenation, I believe, is also to our advantage. So do we want past to be our prologue? If we do not take a step back, and if we do not enjoy this tag-free relationship, this relationship in which we have no baggage of Afghanistan and we have no India baggage, no matter how low-key this relationship is, then the past, unfortunately, will be our prologue going forward. And I strongly believe that Pakistan, has this opening of space whereby Pakistan's identity in the region, for the first time, is not identified by any tag. And this must be used to craft Pakistan's own independent foreign policy. I think Pakistan has so much on its plate. It should focus on regional connectivity. It should finish CPEC projects. It should work towards building its economy and building its regional alliances. This is that point in history where, if we do not have a strategic dialogue with the United States, then it's absolutely okay. We should not go looking for one. Let it be a low-key relationship. Let us focus inward. Let us look at the region. With respect to Afghanistan, I completely agree with all your points, and also your points that you made about the stresses on Pak-US relationship. But Afghanistan, you're right, is sucking the oxygen from what Pak-US needs to establish bilaterally. And that is happening because a lot of convergences that existed for the past 20 years have suddenly transformed, with the Taliban takeover of Kabul, into divergences. Both Pakistan and US were working towards political stability in Afghanistan. They were working towards intra-Afghan peace process. And all of that has just, flipped on its head. And now all of a sudden, Pakistan is, we've been predicting this for so long that United States plan B is scapegoating Pakistan because nobody else fits the bill. But right now, Pakistan is faced with a lot of, aftermath, exactly the same way, history is repeating itself. With respect to counterterrorism and intelligence sharing, probably that's a very, very narrow window in which the US might engage with you. So my 2 cents on this is that, let us utilize the space that we have today in order to just look inward and build our regional alliances. If you continue to bring back the United States to the region and say that, no, you must recognize the Taliban government, you must work with them, then, you yourself are narrowing down your options to play the leadership role that you have the capacity to play as a country. So it is okay to continue to engage the US, but US, I think, is no longer interested. In their mind, the Al-Qaeda threat is neutralized. That was their topmost priority with the entire Afghanistan thing. So these are just my 2 cents. I don't know how would you feel about this, but I believe that Pakistan has an opportunity in a tag-free environment. US building up India. Yes, it has direct repercussions for Pakistan's national security. But there's so much positive that's happening in the region for which Pakistan has a leadership capacity to, just move on and look at the positives and minimize the negatives. So I'll just stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A number of important points have been raised by both our discussants. Let me recap some of them and add 1 or 2 points before we hear Ambassador Asad Majid responding to them all. I think first Ambassador Asad Majid had raised some very, very important points, and I think everybody agrees. Good news is that the relationship is picking up, though through very, very small steps yet. And the fear or the concern is that the principal area of attention still remains Afghanistan and not the bilateral relationship. What we also notice is that despite the heavy economic linkages between Pakistan and the US, like US being the largest trading partner for Pakistan, Ambassador Azamashid pointed out that the geoeconomics will probably have to wait a little bit until these security issues are sorted out, if they are sorted out. Dr. Rifat had raised 3 points, if I noted them correctly. One was that should there be a conflict or confrontation of some sort between India and China, what would be the United States position, practical position at that time? And this is different because the United States now is, dedicated strategic partner of India. Second was that if the relationship is picking up, why is it that the summit level contact has not happened between mainly President of United States and Prime Minister of Pakistan? And the third was a matter of concern, essentially, on what's happening in the US Congress, because the voices coming out of the Capitol Hill are not very encouraging. In fact, when we heard Secretary Blinken speak at the Hill, he even sounded like scapegoating Pakistan for Afghanistan, although later on that was not repeated in that stark terms. But from the Hill, we do still hear explanations being sought from the administration as to what is the role of Pakistan. And the matter has even gone beyond Afghanistan to, as Dr. Rifat pointed out, to even casting doubt on nuclear security in Pakistan, given the Taliban takeover in Afghanistan. So this is a very important subject. So we would like to know exactly how the dynamics in Congress are. What are these task forces working on? When will they present their reports? I understand the Senate hearings are starting on Afghanistan in December. How will that, impact these developments? Then Dr. Rabi Akhtar has given a good angle, I would say, something which is also close to my heart, that whenever United States, attached less importance to us, something good happened to Pakistan. In 1990, we were sanctioned right after the Soviet, troops withdrew from Afghanistan. But in the process, Pakistan developed its own defense industry, even JF-17 and all that. And even we went nuclear in 1998. So she thinks that this DTAG environment, with the, FPAC becoming a matter of the past, is it not really good for us? Why should we be extra keen while development, having good relations with the United States is good, but why should we be desperate? Is there any reason to be desperate for soliciting good relations with the United States? Now, let me add one point or one aspect from my side. In my view, what is most disconcerting for us is the direction that US-China competition will take. We know that they are not into a Cold War yet, but they're moving fast into a competition which seems to be intensifying. And we see a lot of activity in the Indian Ocean, in the Pacific Ocean. We see Quad, we see AUKUS, and a lot else. So how do you see United States viewing Pakistan outside the lens of its competition with China? So that's, I think, because in the official position that the government of Pakistan has taken, we believe that it should not be a zero-sum game, that we would still like to have good relations with the United States as well as with China. So I think these are some of the notable queries that have been raised. So I'll hand the floor back to you for sharing your thoughts and reflections on these points. Ambassador Azamashid Khan.
Well, thank you very much, sir. And thank you all to the discussants for raising very important points. And I'll start with Dr. Rifat Hussein's observations and the three questions that he raised. Now, in terms of what China's response will be, I am not sure how they would react, but going by how they have reacted to what happened earlier, I think they are determined to protect their sovereignty and territorial integrity, and they clearly indicated that they would go to any extent. But for us, I think what is really important is to see in what light that conflict with China puts India in United States, in Washington, DC. And then clearly an escalation between India and China, and a perception that India is the victim only increases the space for India in the Washington policy circles. And that is frankly an angle that we have seen India play here in Washington. They have in a way exaggerated the extent of that conflict here only to gain more sympathy, to gain more support, and to gain more space on issues that are otherwise contentious in their bilateral relationship. And also basically to stall the demands of certain quarters here that had started to raise the question of of India giving the quid pro quo, because clearly individuals like Ashley Tellis have been actively advocating strategic altruism, where India, US should not expect any quid pro quo from India, and keep giving in the hope that it will strengthen a democratic nation, and they will get the dividends in terms of a future investment. But I think that conflict and escalation did frankly increase the space here in Washington, DC for India, and the capacity to overlook their omissions and commissions, I would say even in the context of Kashmir. So they have clearly taken advantage of that escalation. So it has worked to the Indian advantage, and it would increase their space also, first. Second, Dr. Rifat, the Biden phone call is really something that it's a question that is posed to me, and I've also been reflective, but I must premise my response by saying that frankly, we are not seeing this call as the benchmark. And if you want my personal and very candid assessment, I really don't see the call not taking place as a reflection in any way on President Biden's perception of Pakistan or of the relationship. I would see this more because all the calls that took place were more in the context of Afghanistan. So this might reflect his own take on Afghanistan, and you could clearly see that he hasn't really put as much personal political capital behind Afghanistan as President Trump did. So that's and then obviously there are many countries that he has not called. But short of that, you look at the frequency of interactions at the cabinet level. I mean, President Secretary Blinken has spoken to our leaders at least on 6-7 occasions. National Security Advisor has spoken to both the civil and the military leaders. Secretary Defense has spoken. Secretary USTR, who did not actually made a single call during his 4 years with President Trump. And we had not a single meeting, actually called advisor on commerce during the first month of her appointment. Secretary Commerce has called. So I think I really don't see, but it's all speculation I believe that the call will take place when it must, and when the leaders feel that it has to. But for now, it has in no way deterred us from staying engaged. It has not deterred us from continuing our engagements. On the Hill, and this is something that Ambassador Azaz also raised. I think this has attracted a lot of attention. But let me say a couple of things because this is important. First of all, what we hear on the Hill are points of view, not policy. And Congress is a it reflects the whole range of views. And frankly, there is no one set of views on Afghanistan in the Hill and on the Hill. And there are all kinds of individual views, congressmen. So that's, so I am not surprised at any given point. And in fact, it's not just questions being raised on Pakistan. I mean, you just go through the proceedings and you would see that they have attacked mercilessly even the Biden administration. Secretary Blinken was personally attacked. And then in return, the Democratic side also attacked the Republican side. So there is this domestic politics at play. The election is being seen as a reference point. So I would, and then, but something very significant, sir, happened, and Ambassador Azaz would appreciate that more than perhaps others, because I can't recall another time and occasion where US Secretary of State actually walked back. And it's the US State Department walking back on the comments made by Secretary of State during the congressional hearing. And what Secretary Blinken had said, you know, if you, I don't know if you saw the clarification which was issued the following day by the US State Department spokesperson, where they literally walked back. And not it just, it also happened in the context of the statement that Wendy Sherman gave in India, and what she said in Pakistan to our media, what she tweeted. So you can clearly see, and I can say this to you with responsibility, that the content of the conversation, and I've been through very steamy meetings over the years, and I can say this to you candidly, that the content of the conversation is very positive. Now, coming back to the Hill, now there is this resolution also, which has again attracted a lot of attention. Now, that is again a draft, which is signed only by the Republicans. Two, it doesn't really make determinations. It raises questions on Pakistan's role, and also criticizes the administration. This is not, and this is one of the many that basically come to the floor of the House as legislative proposals and do not end up seeing the light of the day. And then the chances of any legislation that has no buyers on the Democratic side, which is the majority side, which would do the markup in the House. So, but having said that, I think it does reflect a certain viewpoint on Pakistan. There is this perception. And as I said in the beginning, that there clearly is skepticism, residual skepticism from the past, and then we will have to keep working hard. And I think Rabia was right, because all of it was actually going pretty well, except for what happened, the sudden meltdown of the Afghan forces. And that has actually, had it been a smooth transition, had Ashraf Ghani not disappeared quickly and everything had not collapsed, you know, it may have been completely different take and perception, you know, in the lead up to the events that, but again, I think we are also seeing clearly and I think it's very important, as I described in the beginning, there is this shock, disbelief, and anger. And I think the dust will settle down. The policy community here would start to see more clearly. and we can already see that the engagement process has started, and the conversations have begun. US clearly recognition is really something that is really not on the table right now, but engagement indeed is, and that is taking place. So I feel that that patience and right moves by Taliban, I'm sure, will basically bring more clarity and more objectivity to the assessments here in Washington, D.C. Rabia mentioned about a relationship free of tax. I think that's a good thing. We want it, and I think we should have it. But the problem really is something that Ambassador Azaz mentioned. I mean, it's, well, India, we may not be hyphenated with India anymore, but China is the new, presence and is the new concern. And how that plays out is, as I said, going to be an important challenge for us. Now, stated position, yes, we keep saying that very loud and very clearly, that we don't want, we don't see it as a zero sum. We don't want to be seen through the prism of China or New Delhi. And frankly, the US side also, to the extent of their stated position, sir, is that they don't want to put this as a choice. So it's not either or for countries to choose. But then at the same time, when you hear of the Blue Dot Network, you hear about the transparency, because we are saying that China came to us when no one else was looking at us. But that does not mean that we are open only for it. And Finance Minister said it publicly yesterday very clearly to a US audience. That you want to do anything, please come and we would welcome your investment. So it's not just for China. So that's something that we'll see. I also see that there is, except for the last 6 months of the Trump administration, when they really went full throttle in terms of conceiving and implementing sanctions against China, I think there is some recognition now that that may not be the most advisable course. And we see things little normalizing, and President Xi Jinping and President Biden's call also, I think, has created the space for the two countries to engage. And so far as we are concerned, we say this privately, we say this publicly, that in our part of the world, we see a lot of space where both these countries and even Russia and others could coexist. And Pakistan, for one, would really want to be open and available to countries. And that's really the geo-economic vision that we have. And I think Afghanistan, and Rabia was right, I think and I think Ambassador Azad also mentioned, with Afghanistan behind us, hopefully, and if we are able to get it to a peaceful state and a manageable state, then clearly I think there are tremendous opportunities that all these countries would like to avail. So I think I will stop there, maybe for another follow-up if necessary.
Yeah, I think we have another 10 minutes or so. But let me express my curiosity on this term of strategic altruism being used by someone there, and that there will be relationship between the United States and India should reach a level where there will be no quid pro quos. I mean, excuse me, such idealism. In fact, I would like to ask you, when you go around the think tanks, do the Americans not see that despite their heavy investment in India through a series of agreements since 2002, right through BECA in 2020, India is not giving up its options. It is still engaged with its largest military hardware supplier, Russia. It has not scaled down its economic engagement with China. So how is US viewing, and how does US really find India a credible strategic partner in all this? And I also want to give the floor to our researcher, Maruk Khan, who wants to ask a question. She deals with relations with US and also with United Nations. Maruk, you have the floor.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. It was a privilege listening to you. Although you have touched upon a couple of things that I wanted to ask, but I would like to hear in particular, you respond to this changing narrative that we hear in Pakistan from geostrategic to geoeconomics. How do you see Pakistan can sell this narrative in the US? You know, one this. Second, I would like to ask that you mentioned Ashley Tellis. Why is Pakistan so far behind in putting its people, in the US on chairs or at positions where they can actually, fill in those spaces by lobbying Pakistan's narrative in the US? And how do you see the diaspora helping Pakistan-US relationship? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. That's a lot of questions, but I like to give 1 minute each to Dr. Hussain and also Dr. Rabia Akhtar for any follow-up point, but only 1 minute each so that we get the last word from Asad Majid Khan Sahib. Sir.
I have no point. Ambassador Sahib, for being so candid and for being so thoughtful and for being so engaging with us. Thank you so much.
Dr. Rabia?
So very briefly, just one question. When has India in its entire history committed to any one relationship with any of its, so-called alliances? Never.
Thank you for your comment. Ambassador Asad Majid Khan, you would have the last word. There you go.
Well, I think we would let our American friends find it out for themselves, Rabia. Sometimes our telling may not be very helpful, and there is a Punjabi saying that Rabia jane te Wapia jane. So I'm sure they will figure this out. And I think Ambassador Azaz mentioned, yes, and this narrative on a relationship without quid pro quo is, even if it is not said in as many words, it's been on display, I would say, since 2005, because US has been consistently at the giving end and India has been at the receiving end, and US, I think it's more because of a want of better alternatives. Secondly, I think China's rise has in many ways compelled the entire Western world and those who adhere to or subscribe to the Washington consensus to look for success stories that they can present as the success stories of open, democratic, Western capitalist model following nations. And I think that desperation also, and Prime Minister Modi and the narrative that he sold, helped by the NRIs here greatly. And I think that's a factor that is playing out in so many ways in influencing the direction of the US-India relationship. A lot of it is still out there in the minds and still not there, because you're right, India has not been forthcoming even in addressing some of the key concerns. And this S-400 deal is going to be an important benchmark that I think we'll have to see how the US reacts and responds, because they have sanctioned one of the NATO allies for going ahead with that deal. So what do they do with India is going to be something that we'll be watching very closely. So it's really still a relationship in the making, which suits the convenience of Prime Minister Modi and both the successive US administrations. But we'll have to see how it plays out. And I think a lot would actually depend on how the China US, and if that escalation continues to go up, it will only increase the space for that partnership and alliance between US and India. On the geo-economic front, yes, I think what really would work for us is to put our own house in order. Because no matter how effectively I sell Pakistan here or anyone sells Pakistan here, if the company that eventually lands in Pakistan comes across hurdles at every point, I think nothing is going to move. And ease of doing business, making it easier for foreign enterprises to operate in Pakistan, changing our corporate culture, changing our service delivery modes is really what will in the long term serve, because the business sector really, while they take their cue from the governments, but at the end of the day, they make those determinations and decisions based on their own calculations of how profitable it is to invest in a particular country. But yes, of course, peace is an essential prerequisite, and that has frankly hampered our integration with the rest of the region. And Afghanistan conflict has been a big impediment. So if that is out of way, that's what the states can do. And I think good political relationships could help facilitate that. But at the end of the day, the expansion of overseas corporate footprint in Pakistan would really depend on how friendly our policies are and how easy it is to do and conduct business in Pakistan.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I think like a clockwork, like a train moving from point A to point B, we are finishing our very program exactly on time. I must say that this was very, very informative, very useful. And I was particularly encouraged by the positive overtones that you brought out, because this relationship is so important for Pakistan. And therefore, you would also be pleased to know that many of our recordings will be watched by thousands of students who would like to get first-hand information from our own ambassador there in Washington for their own research work, for enhancing their own understanding, as well as their teachers. So thank you so much. This relationship will be best served when we accept certain realities of on the ground. I don't think neither of the two countries can ever escape this relationship. I think there is far too much at stake for both Pakistan and United States in this relationship, and we got to preserve it, we got to nurture it. Of course, not at every cost, not at every expense. You always pursue your national interest based on whatever serves your national interest best. Thank you so much. God bless you. God bless our country, Pakistan. And thank you to everyone for participating. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.